Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are absolutely dismantling one of the most popular myths in modern physics, the idea of hidden extra cosmic dimensions. We're going to do this by looking through the lens of the mechanical reality found in the absolute medium framework. Let's get right into it.
So think about this for a second. Whatever you hear about string theory or advanced theoretical physics, you inevitably hear about these crazy, extra curled up dimensions, right? But are those 11 dimensions actually real, or are they just, well, a really convenient math trick?
To understand why those extra dimensions were even invented in the first place, we have to completely shift our mindset. Standard physics tends to treat space as this empty, matter-centric void, where particles are just zero-dimensional dots. But the absolute medium framework tells a wildly different story. It proposes that space is actually a continuous 3D tension net, and matter itself isn't a separate thing inside the void. It's actually just topological knots twisted directly into that very net. Here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll quickly move through the dimensional patch, the 3D tension net, the flatness of space, universal mechanical balance, the limits of perception, and finally, why we live in a strictly 3D universe. Starting off with Section 1, the dimensional patch and a crisis of the point particle. Okay, here is the absolute wildest part about all this. Those 10 or 11 dimensions you always hear about, they aren't actually physical realities. You see, in standard physics, point particles kept literally breaking the math, so theorists decided to stretch them into 1D strings. But in an empty void, those strings would constantly crash into each other. So to fix that problem, mathematicians essentially invented extra dimensions to act as invisible highway overpasses. Literally just a mathematical patch to keep their rigid geometry equations from breaking down. Moving on to Section 2, the 3D tension net. Enter the absolute medium. So if space isn't an empty void, what exactly is it? Well, it's an absolute substrate, known as the dp field, which stands for dissociative pressure field. I want you to think of it as a layer 1 baseline. It's a continuous, highly energetic 3D tension net. And in this framework, physical matter isn't some separate object placed into the void. It's a localized vortex structurally folded right out of the medium itself. And here's where it gets really elegant. Thanks to the nonlinear elasticity principle, this 3D fluid actually stiffens when you strain it. This naturally prevents those catastrophic string collisions that plagued standard physics. A flowing knot doesn't need a magical 6th dimension to avoid crashing into itself because the intense pressure gradients naturally repel and isolate other currents. Those mathematical highway overpasses, they are completely unnecessary. That brings us to Section 3, the flatness of space and the baseline substrate. Think about what happens when you deal with something incredibly massive, like a supermassive black hole. The 3D medium reaches its absolute elastic limit. But instead of collapsing into a singularity or somehow bleeding out into a higher dimension, the medium simply quarantines that extreme structural strain into a localized bubble. If a fourth macroscopic spatial dimension actually existed, the sheer immense topological compression of a black hole would absolutely force the medium to bulge or band right into it. But it doesn't. Cosmological measurements, like the cosmic microwave background, prove that the universe is geometrically flat on a macro scale. Standard physics tries to explain this with convoluted patches like cosmic inflation, but in the AM framework, the answer is purely mechanical. The baseline layer 1 dp field is a continuous tension net that naturally seeks its lowest state of structural strain, which means it equilibrates into a perfectly flat orthogonal 3D grid. The fact that the universe is globally flat is absolute proof that the tension net is pulled taut strictly across 3 orthogonal axes. There is simply no higher up or further out for it to bend into. Section 4, universal mechanical balance and the prevention of energy leaks. In standard physics, symmetry is treated as this abstract mathematical rule. But here, governed by axiom 8, the stability symmetry principle, it is a strict mechanical necessity. Everything functions in symmetry because the continuous 3D medium has to perfectly balance structural tension to prevent local dissociation. Think about the energy leak problem. If a 5th or 6th dimension actually existed, the energy of an exploding star or a radiating particle would naturally bleed into those extra spaces. If that happened, the perfect symmetry of our 3D conservation laws, like mass, energy, and momentum, would instantly fail. You can see this clearly with the inverse square law. The symmetry of gravity and electric charge perfectly dilutes by 1/r². Now, this specific geometric dilution only works if displacement flux expands across the surface of a standard 3D sphere.
If there were a fourth dimension, that flux would be forced to expand across a hypersphere. That would change it to a 1 over r cubed dilution, and under those conditions, according to Bertrand's theorem, atomic and planetary orbits would lose all symmetry and instantly tear themselves apart.
Now for Section 5, the limits of perception and the processing limit of our biology.
You see, human perception relies entirely on mechanical strain. A transverse wave, like light, requires a physical substrate to twist against. Because the energetic net is a 3D lattice of baseline tension, a wave can only ripple across the x, y, and z axes. Whether it's your eyes catching light right now or a massive collider detecting a proton, our biological active skins are just physical engines made of layer 2 moving knots. And they only know how to read these layer 3 structural ripples.
Standard physics will claim that we can't see extra dimensions because they're compactified, shrunk down smaller than a single atom. But the reality is so much simpler, and honestly profound. We only expressly perceive 3 dimensions because only 3 dimensions actually exist to carry information. We don't see a 4th dimension because there is literally no physical medium there to cast a wave or carry a signal. They aren't hiding from us. They mechanically cannot exist.
Finally, Section 6, a strictly 3D universe, the definitive conclusion.
When you pull it all together, the fundamental structures of reality are uniquely locked to exactly 3 spatial dimensions. Rotational magnetic wakes only exist as closed vector fields in 3D. Intrinsic spin naturally exhibits 4-pi closure only in 3D. Stable inverse square flux closure demands exactly 3 dimensions. And maybe most importantly, topological vortex matter remains permanently knotted only in 3D. If spatial dimensionality exceeded 3, a vortex knot would just continuously deform and untie itself right through that extra dimension. The absolute medium framework essentially proves that anything greater than 3D wouldn't just be unnecessary, it would entirely destroy the topological mechanisms that allow stable matter to exist at all.
So as we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought about the true mechanical nature of the reality we actually live in. If our stable existence absolutely demands exactly 3 dimensions, what other complex cosmic illusions are just waiting to be unknotted by a simpler structural truth?